Hello, welcome to our second shot at recording this. I again forgot to punch the record button when we had our meeting, so this will be a dry session. You won't have the advantage of hearing the contributions of the other people involved. So I apologize for that, but it will be a little bit quicker because they had some really good feedback and some good input. So we'll get along without that. But we're still working through our managers program, focusing on applications during these sessions, this program. Uh, Had some great comments and discussions, and so you guys can hopefully remember some of that yourself because I really appreciate the contributions you've made. So the replay videos, again, this will be posted a little later on this afternoon or tomorrow for you guys. Um, so a little twist. We've had our weekly accountability question, and I'm going to make a little bit of change to it because partly in keeping with our style of what we're doing, but also to kind of flow with what you folks are doing there on a regular basis. So, our accountability question, here it is. Well, it's not a question, it's a statement. Beds don't make themselves, and which is another version of how we've been making our beds, but beds don't make themselves. It kind of fits with what you guys have been hearing about cows don't give milk. And so there are a number of reasons to do. We've got time to develop some habits, but the focus of this whole thing is just to develop good practices, develop good habits that can allow us to better represent the kingdom of God, represent the people that we're working with, represent ourselves. And it's all about raising the bar for who we are and how we represent ourselves and one another and our Savior. So, but there's also another reason, and we'll talk about that later, probably next week, on why I'm rephrasing it this way. But beds don't make themselves, so let's keep that in mind and keep pushing forward. As Rocky Balboa said in his movie, talking to his son, keep moving forward. Okay. So, uh, last week we had talked about diversity in teams. And we use the scripture. There were dwelling in Jerusalem Jews, devout men from every nation under heaven, Parthians, Medes, Elamites, Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, Asia, Phrygia, Pamphylia, Egypt, Libya, Cretans, and Arabs, those who have turned the world upside down. Diversity is inherently part of the Christian faith and our covenant. And in Revelation, we read, out of every tribe and tongue and people and nation, he's made kings and priests to our God. And so all the different kingdoms, all the different cultures, all the different characteristics that we have spread across mankind are all different reflections of the nature of God. And it takes us all to work together to do it. When we do, we turn the world upside down. And that's it's an amazing thing to see that it has happened and will continue to happen. And in these times, I think even more so. So we'll continue to turn the world upside down because of the differences that we bring together. We also talked some about how diversity can really be an advantage, but to take advantage of the differences amongst us takes time because we communicate differently, we understand things differently. It just takes a lot of different things for us to be able to pull those things together to uh, to, to be able to get everybody on the same page, to be able to get everybody working together, cooperating, understanding one another. Okay, sometimes just communication can really be an issue for that. So it takes time for diverse groups to communicate clearly, to share the common goals and the ways to get there. So there are likely to be some personality conflicts. A lot of times those are culture conflicts and not personality conflicts because things make sense to one person that don't make sense the same way to somebody else. And so sometimes it's just misunderstandings about what people mean and what they're trying to communicate and and the way they go about doing things. So, but so if you try to have greater diversity just for the sake of greater diversity in your teams, in your groups, it's probably not worthwhile. Okay. Now, diversity is a wonderful thing because God loves diversity, we love diversity, we love all the differences that we bring together. But if we're trying to create a team to do something, if it's very mundane, and the reason I say it, if we're trying to have it just for the sake of having it, because there are a lot of there's a lot of pressure in the United States, I know, and I suspect for the folks around other parts of the world, there's a lot of pressure to increase the diversity of our teams, our groups, our organizations. And if our goal is simply to do that, to increase diversity, we're inviting a host of issues that really make things more complicated and complex. So, in the long run, diversity helps, but you have to take your time and faithfully develop the groups that you have. Okay. So, how does diversity affect communication? Uh, I want to take some time here and go back through the diversity challenges, the diversity issues, why it becomes an issue, and the root issues behind it. Because and actually the challenges for diversity are actually just a subset, just a piece of the challenges of culture differences in general. With diversity, we generally talk about sex, age, uh, race, color, religion, and those kinds of things. But when we start talking about culture, we're talking about some other types of things. And actually, the diversity things that we talk about, for the most part, are just different types of cultural differences because sex and age mean different things in different cultures. And so let me just take some time to kind of go through the basis, the foundation of why it's an issue, why it's a challenge for us in the first place. And if you start thinking a little bit, I keep trying to think of a good example. In the United States, oatmeal used to be a popular breakfast dish for people. Uh, we'd take that or use barley, and it was uh, use a barley cereal. Uh, in the South, especially in the United States now, grits is a very popular. And grits is just ground up, a type of ground up dried corn that you mix water with, cook it, and you know. But the point is, another example, another image might be just a bucket of sand. And where I'm fishing for here is just an example of what our minds are like when we're first born. What's going on between our ears, how our brains work, and there's just not much there. We have a couple of instinctive responses, but not much. There's just not a whole lot. We got a lot of brain cells going on there, but there's just not much happening in there. It takes time for people to develop to the point where they can actually make use of the potential that they have. And so we're tiny little things. We're just born. We get uncomfortable for some reason or another. We get uncomfortable and we begin to make noise. And when we get uncomfortable, begin to make noise, usually there's somebody there to try to help us feel better, to try to make us comfortable, to try to help us to not make noise, to take away the reason we're making noise. So the first thing that happens is somebody will stick something in our mouth to try to put something in our stomach, so in case we're hungry, because that's usually what happens. But little infants need to feed a lot. So that's the first thing that happens. Sometimes that doesn't really work, and so they'll try to check the other end to see if there's a problem down there, and that's why we're uncomfortable. But somebody will usually try to help take care of whatever it is that's making us uncomfortable. And after a bit of time, the little infant begins to recognize that it's usually one person who takes the lead in doing that. And it maybe two or three, but there's one primary person who kind of is stepping up to do most of that in terms of helping us to feel better. And so we begin to associate that person's face and that voice with feeling better. We're uncomfortable. We see this face, we hear this voice, and something happens, and we start feeling better. And there's the warmth of the touch, the warmth of the holding, and those things. So we begin to develop this sense, this positive idea about that face and about that voice. And as time goes by, the voice begins to kind of make sounds and make some good sounds that we pick up on. There's some consistency. We pick up the patterns. We pick up that there's something in that voice that we hear again and again and again and again. And at some point, we might just repeat that and say mom or mommy or mother. And so we've identified that person. For some of us, this wasn't our mother who did that role, but there usually is somebody else who will provide another name or another way to describe that person. But there's usually somebody kind of taking the lead to take care of us. And we begin usually to develop some positive kinds of emotions about that person. When we hear that voice, when we see that face, we would usually start feeling happy just because that voice or that face is connected with making us feel better. And so we understand after a while this idea of mommy, and mommy is this face and this voice. But then over time, we learn that mommy is more than that. Okay. That mommy changes us, mommy bathes us, mommy feeds us, mommy starts giving us different kinds of things, mommy starts teaching us things, helping us move our hands and begin to coordinate our movements. And as we get older, we begin to understand mommy is also maybe the one who does different things around the house that are primarily that person's responsibilities. And so we learn this idea of mom or mother or mommy. We begin to feel that idea in our minds of what everything that mommy is. And when we begin to do that, then we also begin to start adding other to that. Next, we might pick up dad or daddy and begin to fill our minds with everything that dad or daddy is. And then we might add more to that. There might be dog, or there might be a cat, there might be a brother, there might be a sister, uh, different toys, all those different things that surround us in our world. We begin to put a label, put a name on that, and then begin to understand more and more what all that thing actually is. We learn that daddy is different from mommy, talks different, acts different, holds us different, does different kinds of things to us, and we feel differently about that. And brothers and sisters, heaven knows what's going to happen with them. Usually they're pretty nice. But and we can go into a dictionary and we can look up the word mom, mother, mommy, and have an idea what it means because that's the idea that everybody uses. So we have this broad ranging, this generally accepted textbook or dictionary or Wikipedia or whatever uh, description of what mom or mommy is that everybody agrees to. But every one of us has our own definition too. Because when I say mom or mommy, every one of us has a different image come in our mind. Okay. And for most of us, it's a very warm, happy, comforting image. Okay. Honestly, for some people, it's a terrifying image because there was a really dysfunctional person that was taking care of us. And there are people who are actually terrified of the idea of talking with their mothers or even the idea of mother, their own mother, is just very disturbing to them. And as sad as it may be, that happens. So um, if you start having a conversation with people um, about moms or motherhood or things like that, everybody's going to have agreement on what the basic idea is. But at the same time, everybody's going to have a different idea in their mind about what that actually means. And so if you've got 6 or 8 people sitting around talking about mothers and moms and motherhood and so forth, you've got 6 or 8 different definitions of what that word actually means. And so sometimes, if especially if there's some people who have had some really horrible experiences with their mothers, and you're trying to talk about that, and somebody else has this really positive feeling about their mother, and they're talking about their mother in a very positive way. The other person is talking about their mother in a very negative way. They really don't understand each other. They can't really communicate about something as simple as mom because they have radically different definitions of what that word actually means. And so every different thing that they learn has the general book definition that everybody can read and see, but they also have their own personal definition. Now, what happens is my family acts this way, and this is how the people in my family work together and relate together. Our next door neighbors are different. And so if I go and try to have a conversation or discussion or do things with our next door neighbors, we have to get past those kinds of differences. And we might see them act in a certain way and do certain way, and then it may not make sense because that's not the way we do it at our house. What are you doing? Why are you doing that? I remember as a young boy going over to some of my friends' houses and seeing how their families worked, and some of them said that's pretty neat. Some think that's just kind of weird. Because what happens is we learn how families work together. We learn certain rules about what works and what doesn't work. We learn things about obeying our parents and different levels. Some parents are very strict on obedience. And so if they say something, I'm on it right away. Other parents are very lax and more suggestive in terms of what they communicate. And so they won't get the same kinds of responses. And that's the way the family works differently. And so every family is going to have their own different kind of, and interestingly, when you add cultural differences, you find that cultures work differently as well. Family means different things in different cultures. Respect for elders, for grandparents and parents means different things in different cultures. And we have this basic knowledge that we should respect our elders. That's a biblical concept. We should respect older people. We should respect people who have more experience. We should respect everybody. But how that works is going to be very different. I had a classmate in grad school who was from China and from Beijing, grew up there and came over to the United States to go to school with her husband. Her husband came with her, and he was working there in the city that we lived in, and she was in school. And he got a very handsome job offer at another university, at another school, city where there was another university. They had a very similar program. And so they were in some really deep discussions on whether she should transfer and take advantage of that job opportunity for her husband or stay there and take advantage of what the university was offering her for her education, her degree. And the interesting thing to me was before they made a decision, she called her father in China and discussed the whole issue with her father. And I'm thinking in the United States, we would make the decision and then announce it to our parents, but she would not make that decision without the input from her parents. And so the whole mindset in terms of what parents provide for us, for her was very different than it was for me. What family means and the importance of the father's approval, the father's input meant something very different for her that would have meant for most people in the United States. And so that's how culture can affect it because families mean different things. Okay. So as we grow older, we learn more and more about how to work together, what things around us in life actually mean. We learn which side of the road we should drive on and so forth. And we try to drive on the other side of the road, then things just don't make sense. We learn how to uh, check in at work and how to set up our own job responsibilities and things at work. In another culture, it's radically different, and we try it somewhere else, and it just doesn't make sense. In Latin America, you cannot get people to work overtime hardly. They just won't do it. So American companies would go down there and set up operations, and if they get really busy and need an extra work, they would try to get people to work overtime, but they wouldn't do it. They just go home. And so the Americans get very frustrated because we kept trying this and that, and we'd order them to do it and so forth. And no matter what we did, they wouldn't work overtime. And because the family had a priority for them, in places I'm familiar with in Latin America, family is the primary focus of their lives. Work is just a way to support family life. Family's not what happens when you from with your work leftovers, but it's the focus, and so they were not going to sacrifice family time for work responsibilities. It just wasn't going to happen. And so the American companies had to make some adjustments in doing that as far as their scheduling and hiring extra workers and things like that. So the cultures will act very differently and treat different kinds of things very different. And as we get older, we begin to understand these kinds of patterns. We may not actually write them down, or we may not actually be able to say this is how things work, but we know what's right and what's wrong. We know what fits and what doesn't fit. And so if I go to somebody else's house and there's a young boy who's arguing with his mother, maybe even punches or strikes his mother, to me that's not going to work. It really sets me off. I don't understand that. Okay. For them, it may be kind of a normal thing because of the way they were brought up. Very disrespectful, but that's normal to him. It's interesting uh, that abused people usually get involved in abusive relationships. And that's not because they think abuse is good, but it's what's normal. It's crazy to think that some women who have been abused as children, when they marry an abusive spouse. They've got options all over the world. They've got every option that you could conceive of, but they end up marrying another abuser because that's the world they're comfortable with. They're not comfortable when people are treating them well. They're not comfortable when people are treating them with respect. They don't know how to deal with that. They do know how to deal with abuse, but they don't know how to deal with it. And so that's just another kind of way that our minds begin to develop. And actually what happens is our brains kind of put together a a, a, a framework, a template, a, uh, a sort of pattern. When we see something in the world around us, it makes sense or it doesn't make sense. We know how to connect with that based upon all these kinds of things have been adding up in our minds over the years. And so sometimes we can see something like a young boy striking his mother or a woman moving into an abusive relationship and think that's wrong. That makes no sense. Why would you do something like that? And sometimes it's very confusing to us. And a lot of times we get really frustrated and think, why are you so stupid? Not stupid. They just, it's the only thing they're comfortable with. Okay. And so as we move on through our lives, we begin to develop these patterns. So we see an event, we see something going on around us, we immediately interpret and begin to understand it in terms of our own personal history about what makes sense in our lives growing up, on what parents mean and what grandparents mean and what uncles and aunts and family and work and play, all those many different things to different people. And the more radically different the cultures are and the families within those cultures, the harder it is to be even able to communicate. And I remember sharing before about a group I had in a class. And when I put the group together, it was the most diverse group of people I'd ever seen. There was a young man from China, I'm sorry, from Japan who had just arrived a day or two before. There was a woman from the Virgin Islands. There was uh, an African American football player from Queens, New York, inner city kind of a situation. There was a young guy who was a fraternity officer, is very preppy as we would call it. There was another young guy with a ponytail down to his waist. And so I looked at the group and I thought there's the only thing that any two of the people in that group have in common is they have heads and arms and legs. As far as their understanding of life, as far as what life meant to them, their understanding how to communicate, uh, they had nothing going on. And so, but I offered to change it, and the guy from New York, big football player, said, "Oh, we'll be all right." And I said, "Well, your work to begin with probably won't be very good because it's going to take time for you guys to learn to communicate together and understand one another." And it really wasn't. By the end of the term, they were doing really good stuff because they learned how to take advantage of that diversity. But for a while, they couldn't talk. They couldn't agree on anything because they were having six different conversations. So it took time to work through that. But that's what happens with communication is that all those things begin to pile up on one another to where we just really don't understand one another very well. So it takes time and effort. It takes time and effort to bridge those gaps and work through those things. Okay. So first off, lesson number one, you just got to take your time and be patient. Take your time and be patient. Understand when you're working with other people, the greater the amount of diversity, the more you're going to have to take time and be patient with it, and maybe even set up some opportunities for people to communicate. Set up some simple tasks that don't really cost much if it screws up. okay? And maybe even expected to screw up, but knowing that it's going to take some time and they're going to have to go through some things together to really learn how to communicate. So maybe a simple project or a simple job that again, it doesn't really matter so much if they screw it up, but it gives them a chance to communicate and a chance to talk together. Or maybe just ask them questions of them to answer that they have to kind of talk amongst themselves. I used to ask the group, should schools teach values, and generate some conversations amongst themselves that way. So take your time and be patient. The second thing is be careful with buzzwords, with jargon, idioms, proverbs, slang, words and phrases that fit narrowly in one context, but maybe not so much in another. A very popular and common saying in the United States, and I think in other English-speaking nations, is the idea of the whole 9 yards. And for somebody coming from the Orient, from Asia, uh, or Africa, uh, radically different culture, it makes no sense. What are you talking about? The whole 9 yards? You're talking about the yard behind your house. You talk about, I don't understand. So you do use a lot of those kinds of things. Now, over time, as they begin to work together and understand those kinds of things actually become little shortcuts that can communicate a lot of things very easily. And so over time, it's okay for those to begin to develop and begin to take it. But especially at the beginning, be very careful with them and try to set all those kinds of things and speak in very plain, simple and basic kind of terms, and leave all that the jargon, uh, the specialty language of your profession, or of your sometimes you start talking with new believers and using Christian buzzwords, what on earth are you talking about? What are you talking about? Just like Nicodemus, what do you mean born again? That makes no sense. Get to kind of crawl back in my mom again and come out. Over time, we use that word very freely. We use other words like repent. Um, other word some churches use it like Tarian. We need to be Tarian for what? I'm Tarian. So we've got to be careful as believers with new believers is that we're using a lot of words that just make no sense to them whatsoever because it's kind of religious words. So we got to be careful with those kinds of things. Okay, but again, over time they can become very useful. I told you about the situation where the company that I worked for did a lot of really high quality construction work with like doctors' offices and those kinds of things. And we were doing one job that was just sort of a low cost, put it up together quickly kind of a thing. And one of the carpenters asked me, well, how are we going to do this? We're going to do it the normal way we do it. It's going to cost more. We're going to do it the way that a lot of other people do this kind of work and just kind of slap it all together quickly. And Kentucky Fried Chicken had an ad campaign at the time, said, we do chicken right. And so I just said, well, we do chicken right. And so he says, okay, I got it. And I actually heard him and other people talking later on when somebody had asked a question, well, we do chicken right. Uh, because they understood what that meant. We understood that means that we have these standards, and we're going to stick with those standards. We're not going to cut corners. We're not going to take the simple, the easy way. We're going to maintain our standards. We might adapt those a little bit to the job we were doing, but we weren't going to abandon our standards because it was our reputation. So take your time and avoid those kind of phrases that don't mean much to somebody outside your circle. Okay. So for the next 2 weeks, we'll be discussing communication, if you wonder why I was focusing on that so much. Despite the lie that I told you last week about working on vision, mission, and strategy, I had looked at the wrong schedule when I said that. And so I said we'd be doing that, but yeah, then I got back to the right one again. Said, oops, we're doing communication. So that's what we're doing this week and next week is shifting to communication. Um, and it's kind of funny. I said be careful with the idioms, the slang, and all those kinds of things, the jargon, and the proverbs. And so then what we're doing is exactly that. And there's a reason why we do that. Now, a lot of times now I'll ask you guys, are you guys familiar with this? Because most of them you are, but some just are little colloquialisms or things that kind of fit my own history and not so much outside that. But they carry a lot of meaning in a few words, and they're easy to remember and easy to hang meaning to. So that's what we use, and there's a reason to use those. So anyway, excuse me. Get a bit of a drink here. Well, the first one I want to throw out at you is the pen is mightier than the sword. I think we all probably familiar with that because I think it's from an English play or something. The pen is mightier than the sword. Uh, and the reason I throw that out is because communication has an immense power to it. But what is the most common trait of successful leaders and managers, from the first line supervisor, from the bottom of the totem pole, right above the operational workers, uh, the all the way from the supervisor over the janitorial staff, all the way up to the head of the organization. One particular trait is for the successful ones is really the most common one. Okay, they have a lot of different kind of skills, a lot of different kind of abilities. The most common trait is they work hard at communicating. And have told people for years, communication, I'm just not the best communicator. But I really began to say, understand I needed to work hard at it. And I told one guy that was in my department, I'm just not the best communicator. He says, well, you're a whole lot better than anybody else we've had. So I'm really not doing a very good job of this. And he says, oh, you're doing better than anybody else we ever had. Just keep at it. But you work hard at it. Okay. And because you have to think ahead, you have to understand who it is you're talking to. You have to understand the message and how you're going to communicate out what the right and the best way to do that is. You need to keep polishing those things and getting better and better at it. Okay. Uh, the second thing, the second common trait is they develop public speaking skills. A lot of people just are terrified of public speaking. Some people love it. But successful leaders, all the way from the low end up to the top end, develop public speaking skills. Because if you stop and think, when you're talking to three people, that's public speaking. When you're talking to a work crew, that's public speaking. Okay. When you're talking to the entire organization, when you're talking to the entire church, when you're preaching a sermon, that's public speaking. When you're out on the streets sharing the gospel, that's public speaking. And so the same kind of things. We'll talk about that a little bit next week. But they work on public speaking skills. The third thing is they work hard at becoming active listeners, because listening is a key part of communicating, because you're really not communicating if you're not understanding what the other party's up to. Okay. So they work hard at being active listeners. They focus on how can I hear what's the person up to, not just passive sitting and letting whatever drifts across the air land in my lap, but really trying to pull things out. Okay. Communication is the most powerful natural tool that we have. We have Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is a great example in the United States that changed the landscape of the culture in the United States. There are streets in most cities named after him. A holiday for him. We have laws in place, federal laws in place that are the result of the things that he did and the discussions that he had. Now, if you look at him personally, he didn't have any reason to do that. He was not a wealthy man. He didn't. He was not a big player in industry or in commerce or in the corporate world. He had a small church in Atlanta, Georgia, and not really a big church, and so he didn't really have a big sway in a denomination. He was not seen as a great leader in the church, but he influenced our nation. But the thing he did was he's a great communicator. He was a public speaker and made speeches that people still quote and remember today. And you'll see a lot of times you'll see phrases and parts of his speeches listed. "I Have a Dream" was a famous speech, and it was a wonderful speech. and really had a powerful impact on our nation. But it was his communication that was his tool for change in America. Um, another proverb: leadership is not about being in charge; it's about taking care of those in your charge. Okay, communication is critical, but we need to make sure that we're focusing on not just spitting something out or throwing something on the table, but the reason why we're communicating is for the sake of our organization, for the sake of the people that we're communicating to. So communication is critical, but it's the people that are involved, and it's not something for me. Okay, it's something for the organization. Now, a part of the thing that people don't often realize in any kind of an organization, whether it's a church organization, whether it's a commercial organization, whether it's a hospital, a factory, whatever it is, anybody in any kind of position of influence and authority spends more than half their time in communicating and interpersonal things. Okay, dealing with people. Now, the lower you are on the scale, if you're the supervisor of the bathroom crew, of the housekeeping crew, you'll spend more time on task, helping people do their jobs right. If you are at the top of the organization, if you're in Dr. Wayne's position, then you spend a lot more time focusing on vision and mission and putting all the pieces of the things you're doing together. What kind of things do we need? We need a different building because of where we're going. Okay, we need these people, we need these activities going on. So so your focus gets bigger, okay? But the issue is still the same. You spend more than half your time. So understanding the personal connection and communicating is absolutely essential. We're not going to do anything well if we don't really develop those communication skills and abilities and focus. Focus is a good part of it. So everything managers do involves communication. Uh, the timing of it, when's a good time to do something, how important it is, whether it's a very important message or something that's not quite so important, is going to affect how we do it. We, we need to focus on edifying and building up. Let all things be done to edifying. What are we going to use? How are we going to communicate? Is it going to be a speech? Is it going to be a sit down and chat with somebody? Is it going to be an email, a text? Is it going to be a letter broadcast to everybody? Or is it going to be something else? Okay. The medium that we use, the way we get the message across needs to fit with the message. If I'm going to ask, I didn't propose to my wife with a text message. Of course, we didn't have text then, but I wouldn't do that. It just doesn't fit. That very informal way of communicating just doesn't fit with the importance of the question of asking her to be my bride and make a covenant with me. And so how important it is, and kind of things like that. The obstacles that get in the way, okay. What's going to be a problem for us? It's thinking ahead, being proactive. What's going to be a problem? What are the potential problems in getting this message across? And them understanding where we are. If I'm talking about sharing vision and compelling people to engage in a vision, or if I'm helping somebody to know which road to take to get from here to there. Okay, I'm gonna use different ways to do that. And so, but what are the things that get in the way of doing that? If I'm going to share somebody the best roads to take to get from here to there, then I'm going to be very detailed. I may even draw a map or plot it out on a map for them, or write out instructions, turn here and turn there and go this far and go that far. So I may be very detailed with the instructions versus this broad picture painting exercise that comes with talking about vision. So, but be proactive, be ahead of it instead of having to go back and redo it over and over. There are going to be misunderstandings, unintended consequences, but consider those ahead of time. Think about that stuff before you get involved in trying to do it. And the more important the message is, the more important it is to do that. Uh, Another thing, keep the main thing the main thing. And this is really a good one to throw into communication discussion. We'll talk about that. What is the main thing in communicating? In any kind of communication situation, what is the main thing? Okay. And the main thing is not the message. The main thing isn't you. Well, hopefully that'd be the first thing we check off the list. Sometimes people have this idea that they need to get their agenda taken care of, and so the main thing is their agenda, or how it makes them look. You know, I need to do a good job so I will look good. But that's really not. Those far fall down the list. The most important piece of the communication puzzle is the audience. It's the audience because those are the people who you're there for in the first place. If you don't get them, if you don't reach them, if you don't connect with them, if they can't really grasp hold, if it doesn't work for them, it's not going to work. Okay. So you got to frame the thing, you got to and present it. You got to package it up, present it in a way that fits that person or those people for that situation. Okay. Is it talking to a lot of people? Is it talking to one people? I'm going to use different ways to do that. Is it really important to go to some extra effort, or is it more casual or of a suggestion kind of a thing? So what's the best way? Is it talking about it the best thing? Is it writing it down the best thing? Is sending out a video a good way to do? If you want to reach a lot of people, a good video is a good way to do it. If you want to create pictures about things, a video is a good way to do it. An email, a text, the grapevine. We'll talk about the grapevine a little bit more later, but sometimes using the grapevine to communicate is a pretty smart choice. Is it formal? Is it informal? Do I need to use a billboard so everybody sees it? You know, do I need to get a hammer to get their people's attention? Okay. Uh, take some time and consider what is the message? What are the people that this message goes to? What's the best way? What kind of things do I need to do to get this to work? Um, Another little funny thing here. There are two theories to arguing with a woman. Speaking of communication, there are two theories to arguing with a woman. Neither works. Okay. And the point I'm throwing out here is that there are some things to consider when uh, we're trying to communicate with people. One is we're not going to try things that aren't going to work at all. Okay, we're going to find things that work, but there are some things to watch out for. Some things that kind of pop up and get in the way of our communication processes of getting our message across and getting people to understand and grab hold of what we're trying to do. Um, the sorry, I jumped too quick. The barriers, perceptions, what we're thinking, what's in our mind, how I see this problem. Again, if we come from different cultures, men see things different from women, believe it or not. So what we're thinking, our mindset, our framework, whether sometimes if you're talking about somebody with a position, they're going to see the thing one way. If you're talking about somebody who's the patient, they're going to see it the same. You can be saying the same thing, but they're going to hear two different things. They're going to see what you're trying to communicate different. They're going to understand it differently. Okay, so that's the difference. You need to understand what people are thinking and how they might apply that or how they might interpret it themselves. So sometimes using visionary kind of picture stories, getting onto some common interests, and things like that can kind of help with the perception thing, kind of getting everybody on the same page together. Another one is filtering. Filtering is when we either we withhold stuff, we don't give them the whole picture, and sometimes that's helpful. A lot of times it's not, or they kind of filter because they've got all these things going on in their lives. They're kind of only taking in things that they grab their attention or that matter to them. Okay, uh, so filtering is another issue. And noise is just anything that interferes. Yeah, any kind of distractions, if it's literally a noisy environment where sometimes you need to get away from that. If there's a lot of people throwing out different opinions about something, you might just need to kind of get away from that or find some way to focus everybody on the same and the same goal and the same outcome, get everybody to agreement on something in common. Different people have different priorities. What's important to one person is not so important to somebody else. And so that can become an interference that can kind of get in the way of getting the point across. Sometimes just people being tired. People are just fatigued, they're just wore out and frazzled. It's hard for them to either communicate or understand. Okay, so that gets in the way too. Uh, so there comes some different kind of things we can do for that too. Um, but we need to be aware of those kinds of things. So how can we overcome those kind of things? Well, perceptions, we need to get people on the same page. Take time to figure out where they're coming from and meet them there, or bring them where you are. But focus on their mindset. A lot of times, just telling a story at the beginning, and I really enjoy seeing how Dr. Wayne does that. Taking some time at the beginning of his teachings to get everybody on the same page. As you tell a story, give a situation, read a scripture, and to kind of tie that scripture into something, or sort of set the. This is why we're talking about these kinds of things. Different things he'll use to try to get everybody on the same page, and before he starts moving into the meat of it. Okay. Filtering, just be work at being conscientious and thorough. Being clear, getting rid of a lot of the jargon and things that kind of people are not going to pay attention to. Making sure that you're providing the audience with what they need and not with just what you want them to have, and to provide it in a way that kind of fits with where they are at that time. And for the noise thing, just avoid the literal noise. Signal fidelity just kind of means that the message and the way I'm presenting the message fits with the big picture. All the things kind of line up. Yes, we've talked a lot about alignment. Signal fidelity just means alignment. It means that we're using the best way to get it across. Uh, Using a text message to propose marriage is a signal fidelity problem. They use the wrong one, so the problem is there. Um, Another good example, we heard Dr. Wayne talk several times about uh, body language, and we'll hear a little bit more on this later about how body language is the most powerful part of communication. Sometimes it's really confusing when their mouth's saying one thing, but their eyes and their hands and their facial expressions are saying something else. It gets very confusing. Um, and so sometimes that can be a problem. So make sure that everything aligns. Use the appropriate medium, a formal speech versus a sit down chat versus an email, text, whatever. Use one that fits the situation. Okay. One thing that I've always done, or I try to do, is say if I'm hearing this, how would I want to hear it? If somebody wants to communicate this to me, how would I want them to do it? Okay. Very formal, very informal. Pull me off to the side and kind of go through this, write it down so I can remember it. What would be the best way for me to grab hold of this? Okay. So, I threw this last one in here. If there are any other topics, we've got the syllabus, the topics that are on the schedule to discuss. But if there's anything else that pops up that you'd like to go over, like you'd like to talk about, um, have some discussion about, let me know. Let me know. We'll try to address that. Try to see if we can fold some things in that kind of fit where you guys are too. Um, this is a great topic. Communication is a great topic because we're all involved with it, very, very, very deeply involved in communication all the time. So this is a great topic to spend a little bit of time, come up with some proverbs, come up with some street wisdom, don't count your chickens before they hatch, and some other kind of things that you use or that you have used, and share those, or try using them and see how they work. Okay, but bring some stuff with you. Okay. Part of walking in the Spirit is taking the things that are set out before you and putting to work, whether they're secular things or churchy things. So God's trying to teach us how to grow into Christ's image. And that happens when we become doers of the word and not hearers only. Uh, And the word is whatever comes from the Spirit. You know, the word is it's in our mouth and our heart, but it's also we have the written word, we have prophetic words, we have the word coming through us in a variety of different ways. But we need to be doers of all those things. Okay, we need to put those in practice. And so it's always great to share how we've done that. So again, remember, now that I've recorded on a dry recorder without you guys there. This will be posted on YouTube, and if you don't have access to it, then feel free to let me know. Get that set up for you. All right. So I am going to stop sharing, and uh, I would enjoy it a lot more if I hadn't messed up and forgot to record it. But here we are. Bless you guys. Have a great week. Feel free to share this with anybody else. These are public. So if they help you, if they help somebody else, by all means, go for it. Bless you guys. We'll catch you next week.